In today's video, we're talking about Qubic, the AI-focused blockchain project that carried out a 51% attack on Monero. It's being described as an attack on proof of work as a whole, and according to the news flow on this, the Qubic network are now moving their attention to Doge. Ulf, we built the Gajumaru to be very different from that. It is, yes, it's a proof of work core that enables a universe of interoperable infrastructure, which we call associate chains, hence the Gajumaru name. But it's not only that it's not an ASIC-based system, that's the cuckoo cycle aspect of it, but there are specific things that are built into this that have a huge impact on settlement speed. Now, settlement is the reality of transactions. Transactions are just the record. It's not that the value has actually moved for certain. That's something that we wanted to make occur within seconds or minutes from a probabilistic perspective, and everything in life is probabilistic. So witnessing is at the core of that. So would you like to just explain to the audience a little bit of what's gone on with Qubic, how they approach this, what happened with Monero, how we're fundamentally different, and really dive into the witnessing aspect?
Yeah, so the thing about brute force attacks on proof of work chains is that they allow you to essentially rewrite history. That if you can introduce a longer version of the recent history, then all nodes will just automatically switch to that. And so in your alternative history, you could have, for example, unspent transactions that you made earlier. So essentially you buy something valuable, you rewrite the history, and then you get the money back. Now, Qubic didn't actually do that. They just demonstrated that they could. And the novel trick they used was that essentially they incentivized Monero miners to join their attack by paying them better. And this actually does attack one of the weaknesses of proof of work blockchain mining, is that the assumption is that miners are simply greedy, and therefore they don't care about the contents of the block as long as they get paid. Now, in this case, they weaponized the greediness by saying, okay, but we pay better, so if you join the dark side, we can attack the chain that you were mining for. Now, these attacks usually stretch out over time. You build the alternative history over, in Qubic's case, a few hours. Now, a protection that Gajumaru has is that our witnessing system allows essentially validators or witnesses to testify that a block properly follows the top of the chain. Now, with Bitcoin NG, the blocks you testify are key blocks. Those are the blocks that are mined. They contain no transactions. So it's a content neutral testimony that just basically says we are still following the top. And if the next block includes a majority of witnesses testifying that the previous block was okay, that block cannot be evicted from the chain, which means that transactions, as long as witnessing is working properly, and you can observe this in real time, will become finalized within 2 to 4 minutes. So that becomes the attack window on a Gajumaru chain. So that is one way that we feel that we are make these kinds of attacks very hard to stage on Gajumaru. So the other thing that we have introduced that we think is a bit special is what we call defensive mining. Now, defensive mining is that if you have a blockchain that actually allows you to run real commercial activity, like a real retail business or whatever, and you have invested in selling your services, goods and services on with the Gaju, on the Gajumaru chain, you actually have an incentive to mine a little bit, contribute to mining capacity on the main chain just to stabilize it, because this protects your business case. So it becomes a form of insurance. So we call this defensive mining. Such miners would be really hard to lure over to essentially do fake mining for an attacker, because they would be attacking their own business. And why would they do that? So these are ways that we feel that we have secured the Gajumaru pretty strongly against these kinds of attacks.
There's a lot more to this, because one of the fundamental transitions, two of them actually, one is that associate chains are literally designed to fit to regulated sovereign industry or community groups, that where there is a specific requirement, whether that is a sovereign requirement for a national blockchain infrastructure to support a national payment system with a national currency in a digital form, or it's an industry who want to run a supply chain management system in their own associate chain with their own rules and their own trust bases. That in itself means that you have real activity that becomes something that secures the whole thing anyway. But Greg, we talked a little bit in the long form video about the Bitcoin mempool and the fact that it costs somewhere between $114 and $196 to enter a transaction into the Bitcoin system. And the mempool has died off completely. There's almost nothing in there. The real change that I think we see from this is that where the Gaju is useful as money, it is money. It changes the equation. It removes that nothing at stake issue as well.
Right. So because transactions in Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain are not commercially viable, you can't use it in a retail setting at all. You never could. That combined with the fact that Bitcoin has now been pushed out to all these, like it's been adopted by these kind of in these institutional settings, like ETFs and so on, where all the trading in Bitcoin is happening off of the Bitcoin chain. But operating the chain, the cost of mining a block, just because of the mining power that's wrapped up in the Bitcoin mining network, is so high. Producing a block costs over $100. Or I'm sorry, producing a block costs like $100,000. Each transaction that you have room for within a given block is over $100. But the price of including a transaction, the transaction fees that you pay, are just a couple now. If even that, it just dropped off to where it's very cheap now to push a transaction to the Bitcoin chain because no one's transacting on the chain. So what this is that in a given amount of time on a blockchain, you've only got a certain number of transactions you can push through. That makes space in the mempool supposed to be competitive, price competitive. So you have too many transactions trying to go through too small of an amount of transaction space. That should make each transaction very pricey to process. In that context, those pricey to process means the amount of money that you're paying the miners to process the transaction for you should be a competitive aspect of mempool participation. That money's supposed to go to the miners. That increases the amount of reward that the miners get, is however much you pay in transaction fees. That has not actually played out in a way that's favorable to the Bitcoin mining pool. And I don't know. We're in really weird territory now with that. I don't know how the incentives for mining are actually going to play out for Bitcoin going forward, because there's some very weird versions if you watch charts, like how much it actually costs, how much cost in terms of like a mining effort goes into mining each transaction that shows up on Bitcoin versus the price of inclusion is like split now. It's a massive split. That's not healthy. Something funny is going on there. And there's no, as you mentioned, associate chains, there's no pathway for Bitcoin to like adapt to local regulation and to have like actual child chains that it's aware of and so on, which is a problem that we solved. So we have a really nice, smooth graduating path to kind of graduate from these big early high mining rewards to get a lot of Gajus out in circulation, and then transition to mempool rewards, transaction fees actually being the bulk of what miners are aiming at. Because we have places that we can shed load off in terms of retail load and just daily transaction volume off to locally regulated and locally operated associate chains that where the Groot is aware of the associate chain and the associate chain is aware of Groot. There's a mutual confirmation that can occur of at least existence, which does not exist in the whole layer 1, layer 2, blah 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 type systems. They don't. The reason they have so many security problems is they're not aware of each other. Having solved that gives us a nice graduated path forward in terms of the evolution and maturation of the entire system as a whole. But to start with, we're going to start off like, of course we will, running some things directly on Groot because right now it's got a lot of available bandwidth and we can shove tons of stuff per second in there. So I'm really excited to be able to prove the concept once and for all that you can run a marketplace actually on chain, which has just been a thing that hasn't happened yet. So I don't know where this is all going to lead, but we have all the tools and all the options available to let Gajumaru evolve in a nice way. And starting with being able to finally publish marketplaces where people can really transact in real time on chain and do pay at the counter stuff on chain instead of all this off chain magical ledger stuff that leads directly into FTX territory. I'm very excited about that. So maybe finally blockchain's coming of age.
It is. And look, I'm going to bring this back to where we started. So we spoke at the outset about Qubic, attack on Monero, and now allegedly Dogecoin, and what that means for proof of work. And what is being said in the press about this is that this could mark the end of proof of work as an idea for how we do things. But actually our position is that the only way that you can really trust the message, not the messenger, securely at scale is in a proof of work system. Anonymous proof of stake, as we've covered before, is fake. It's really not something you can put any trust or confidence in. But obviously there's a lot of money behind the agenda. And maybe that's where some of the money for Qubic came from, is people trying to end the debate between proof of stake and proof of work. But put that speculation to one side. The point is, actually, the way we've designed the Gajumaru is very different. The entire approach is very different. And the question really starts to come in when mining is supported not just by people from a purely agreed perspective of trying to win the race, to solve the puzzle, to get the reward, but also about filling up that mempool, running all those transactions through, that actually the processing of transactions becomes a greater reward than the winning of the race itself. And more fundamentally, that in a system that benefits everybody using it, there's an incentive for everybody to contribute a small amount of computational capacity to a defensive end. In other words, to ensure the sanctity of the entire network. With that, gentlemen, thank you for your time and thank you for listening. Bye-bye.